and welcome to Note Doctors. My name is Paul.
My name is Jen.
My name is Ben.
And we are your hosts. We are all university music theory instructors who are passionate about music theory and music theory instruction. In this podcast, we will be talking about all things theory with some of the best music theory teachers in the country. If you want to know more about music theory and the most effective and innovative ways to teach it, this is the podcast for you. Hello and welcome back to Note Doctors. Happy 2022. We made it through another year. We're going to do a little bit of a wrap-up for this episode, wrap-up of 2021, all the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so we're just going to share our thoughts of things that we learned, things that we did well, things that we may not have done well over this past fall in our own teaching, and things that perhaps we hope to improve upon as we enter into the spring. So, Jen, Ben, how are you all doing?
Pretty well. Happy New Year, Paul.
Hanging in there, surviving.
Yes, yeah. 2022 is looking just as bad as 2021. But yeah. we're gonna venture on. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the fall semester, and maybe one thing that each of us changed in our teaching this past fall semester as we look back on it. I think that's one of our goals. I think all three of us, we're always kind of looking at ways we can improve, self-assessing, and I think the fall semester was just another opportunity for us to look at how we do things and do them better or do them differently. And so what did you all do differently?
Well, my dean very graciously granted us a full set of keyboards for our 2 theory classrooms so that every single student could have a sort of miniature keyboard at their desk during any theory class, which was amazing. I wrote the proposal and I said sort of like, if we could have one for everybody, that would be great, but we'll even take like one for half of them and we can trade off and, all sorts of stuff. And he really came through for us. And so that alone made some major changes in how I did things in actually all of my written theory classes in the fall. So in Theory 1 in the fall, we had them out every day. And what I loved was that even on days where I didn't say, hey, we're using the keyboards a lot today, go get them out of the closet or whatever, the students would just automatically go get them because they liked having that tool in their hands. And so we did, from day one of Theory 1, we did a ton of keyboard activities. Sometimes it was simple things like we're all going to play this scale together, or we're all going to play, all of the chords in E flat major or whatever together. But eventually, their knowledge got to a place and their keyboard skills got to a place where we could do some really fun things. So like when I taught the Traceo rhythm, they were buddied up with a partner, and one of them would play a chord progression in the Traceo rhythm while the other student improvised a melody. Gave them
show us that or sing us that rhythm in case people aren't aware?
Da, 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 da. It's really common. It's in everything. But so one student was playing the chord progression in that rhythm that we had just learned that day. And then the other student had really basic rules for improvisation. So you can play any note that fits with the chord, or you can play any note that doesn't fit with the chord and then see what you think that note should do. Right. And then it's kind of a simple response from the students. So when I go listen to them, I'll say, what do you think worked well? What would you do differently if you did it again? And then they would switch, the other partner would improvise a melody. But so they would come up with I was just in awe of them the whole semester. Theory 1, they've just learned how to spell Roman numeral 1. And yet what they could intuitively do at the keyboard was so much more than they're able to demonstrate with their written skills. And it improved kind of both of those things as we went through the semester, both their ability to improv and think musically and all of that, and also to write it down and talk about it in that way. It was great. And I used them in my upper level classes too. So in Theory 4, for example, I made them play My Country 'Tis of Thee in all of the wacko scales. So they had to play My Country 'Tis of Thee in whole tone, My Country 'Tis of Thee in octatonic, My Country 'Tis of Thee in the hexatonic scale, right? So it made for some really interesting melodies. They had to play it in all the modes, right? And think through what that would look like, how that would sound in that mode. And then we also did some improving with those scales and things like that. So the keyboards changed a lot for us, and it made it just so much more hands-on. It was a really good change this fall.
That's awesome. Wow. In my class, we just launched this fall our jazz integration to the core theory program. So we did a lot more integration of lead sheet symbols, taking pop songs, and kind of sometimes critiquing the internet Wikipedia version of the song and saying, wait a minute, was that actually what was listed on there? And I think the students enjoyed that a ton. Also, I did a composition project in Theory 1 that was different from what I've done in the past, and I gave them 3 multimedia prompts. So one of them was a top-rated game, which was Lego Star Wars lightsaber battles, and another one was the Skyview app, which you hold up your phone and look at the constellations. And I said, write something, 1 minute. And then the other one was a TV show theme song, a kid's show. So I just kind of prompted them, and I was just so amazed to see the results of that. It was absolutely stunning, and a lot of them said, hey, we need to do more of this next semester. So I'm thinking about kind of adapting it more for next semester and kind of seeing like, okay, what are the trending apps, or what are the trending, top 10 shows or games. Trying to kind of use that more as a prompt instead of trying to to refer back to our last episode about the corralling the corral, more like 4-part writing of chord progressions or something, try to prompt with something more from a multimedia context. I think is a really, really cool thing to do that the students enjoy a lot. And a lot of them, I think, were better. I played for them the original, and then played some of the student ones. I think the student ones were better than the originals. So certainly it was kind of cool
nice.
to see that. Yeah. And I discovered one of my students has this YouTube channel that has like all these film score analysis things, and I thought, wow, my goodness. One of my students was writing a song every day the whole semester. I had no idea until I discovered the YouTube channel. So there's just all kinds of stuff that came to light through doing that, and doing the jazz integration was absolutely awesome. It was very fun, very cool.
That's awesome. Now, did they write the pieces, or did they record them, or?
It depended on the student. One of my students, actually, Alex, he did trumpet part that he played himself, trombone part that he played himself, keyboard parts that he played himself, drum kit pattern that he played himself over Thanksgiving break at his parents' house. Yes, and then he made this full video of himself playing all of these with the graphic of the TV show intro. So that was very elaborate. That was, kind of the most involved, I guess. But the requirement was just to write it yourself. And you could use, if you used, Logic Pro or Digital Audio Workstation or whatnot, you could submit with that too, as long as you answered all the questions that went along with it. I kind of prompted with some more comparative questions. We were talking about this before we signed on, comparing different styles and did you use the phrase model? Why or why not? What kind of keys did you use? Why did you use those keys? Or what kind of meter? Why did you use that meter? Questions like that are kind of more comparative, instead of telling them to write a 4-part SATB 1451 or something.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. So for my semester, it's a little, it was a little out of left field for me, but at Texas Women's University, I'm going to do a quick history lesson here. So we had in the early 20th century, we had a black community, a free black community just south of our campus that was forcibly removed in 1922 when Texas Women's University was called the College of Industrial Arts. It was still a women's university, and it was turned into a park. And one of the main kind of motivators of moving that black community, which was called Quakertown, was because of this school, this female school just up the road, and how we had all these, young white women, and how it was dangerous, and all these things like that. And it's really kind of it's a black eye on the university, on our city of Denton, and most people don't even know about it. And so a number of my colleagues in the College of Arts and Sciences, they got this actually an NEH grant to do experiential learning and to create this basically a memorial and a place to learn on our campus. And so they invited faculty to participate in that. So I applied, and I was one of the faculty, and so my job was to incorporate the stories of Quakertown, so the stories of these folks, into one of my classes. And so I decided to incorporate that into my Theory 4 class. And so what we ended up doing was learning about Quakertown. We had a couple interviews, and people came into class, and they had to write a composition kind of inspired by the Quakertown stories. And it was really kind of very, very free. And it was a project that we did all semester. Most of the time, my composition projects are like at the very end. We spend 2 or 3 weeks on them. But this one I was really nervous about, because I wanted to make sure that they were really thinking through things and having as good of results as possible. And also just there's kind of some difficult conversations to have. And so we started at the very beginning. We took a field trip down to the park, and we walked around, and we had a map of where the buildings were from where this community was. And so it was really cool. And then we kind of had workshops periodically where they'd bring in what they had. We would talk about musical things. We'd also talk about appropriation and perspective. Okay, you're a white guy and you're singing from the perspective of someone who lives in the Quakertown. Is that appropriate? And we're like, well, I guess not. That's not, that's probably not the perspective I should be having if I'm writing this song. And being able to talk about those kind of challenging topics were really good. And then we eventually had we performed them kind of for class, and hopefully this spring we'll have actually a kind of a public performance in the kind of the space that's being set aside to remember Quakertown. So that was a different thing than I did this semester, and we're going to be doing that again with my students in the spring as well. So that was
fantastic.
Nice. Yeah.
So, but yeah.
Thanks for sharing that, Paul.
Well, yeah. I'm super inspired by just listening to you guys. So that's so, yeah.
So what are we doing differently in the spring? What are we changing? Yeah, that's how I feel too. Well, for one thing, I'm teaching totally different classes this spring. I'm teaching pedagogy for the first time, actually, because I had a colleague retire. She used to always teach it, and so now I'm going to get my hands on it, and I'm excited about that. And I certainly have thought a lot about how to teach that class based on Lee Van Handel's talk at SMT. Just what really needs to be in that class. And my pedagogy instruction in my master's degree was very good, but it was very do you have the skills to do this? And I think I would like to talk with the students about some of the best practices just as a teacher. How do you write a lesson plan? How do you plan a semester curriculum and consider the things that need to go into a sequence? How do you, some of those more practical things? What do you do if the students are not getting it? What do you do if your planned sequence isn't working out because the students are either way ahead of where you thought they would be or way behind where you thought they would be? How do you decide how to grade an exam? How do you find good examples to put on a test? Just some of those more practical things that you kind of don't get anywhere else, in the curriculum. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, I mean, the pedagogy class that I teach at TW, I've been thinking back to my first time I taught it, And the way I teach it now is totally different, because at first I was like, all right, well, let's talk about understanding these theory concepts. And, and we did all this analysis, and we talked about, and it was more about like getting the students understanding the theory so that they could then teach it, because if you just understand the theoretical concept, you can teach it. But that's not that's not enough. It's about the practical elements, like how do you as you talked about, Jen, creating lesson plans, finding examples, how's a course grow throughout the semester, and how do you deal with students who are ahead, behind, all these things. There's like these practical applications, because at least in my instance, like none of my students are going to be teaching theory as their main gig. But they might find themselves teaching theory, or they're going to find themselves teaching. And so what are kind of basic teaching skills can I give them? And that's been more my focus, certainly, in the past couple semesters.
Yeah, for sure. I feel that a lot. Mine has definitely been ongoing this year, probably more of what we kind of talked about a little bit in relation to John Kovach's SMT, which was having to do with last year. I took a lot of examples from marginalized composers and said, oh my gosh, I need to be more inclusive, and kind of in that spirit, I think one of the next steps that a lot of people are thinking about is how do we kind of treat music on its own terms? Are we taking examples and trying to fit them into existing kind of curricular holes where they don't necessarily fit, and how to teach those better? I think that's a question that a lot of people are wrestling with. I'm definitely kind of taking that as like my main point of departure on all of my lesson plans is, am I putting square pegs into round holes, or, how can I better structure the way this lesson is put together to really reflect different styles appropriately and show that in the best possible way with the music as the leader, instead of the theory. Which is, it's just so, it's hard to do that. I mean, that's something that I think we even talked about a lot, is just, music versus theory, what takes the lead? Sometimes it's a lot faster to lead with the theory. You have 10 minutes to teach whatever. You can just explain the theory and you're done. But is that necessarily the best thing? Maybe not. A lot of the times the music taking the first step, and then the theory kind of saying, well, how do we analyze that? Just like you were saying, Jen, when you're having your students improvise, reflecting on like, what just happened? What did I just hear? Because a lot of times we're preparing our students for music that hasn't been written yet, and music that we ourselves have not even been exposed to. So, to do those two things, you really have to challenge yourself to, on a daily basis when you're creating lessons, like, okay, let's let the music take the lead and try to like, get those theoretical concepts that you feel are important to your students, but also really contextualize them properly and adequately. I don't know. It's something I think
and
about.
I think part of contextualizing them well is taking out the measure of how good or bad something is, right?
Yes.
Like just removing that as something that you ever talk about in theory class, and instead approaching it for what it is. Like, what do we see in this example? What can we learn from this? What does it teach us about, melody or counterpoint, or which of course can apply very broad, or syncopation. When I taught syncopation, we looked at like a 16th century example. We looked at something from West Side Story. We looked at some popular music, some jazz. We looked at some polyrhythmic drum music. We just to kind of get a sense of like, syncopation is a thing, and it exists in lots of different structures in lots of different ways. How does it show up in that space? So how does syncopation show up in jazz music? How does syncopation show up in, non-Western music, specifically this drum video that we just watched? How does it show up in this 16th century motet or whatever,
Yeah.
Not saying,
and then you
like,
always have more questions. Like even within jazz, it's like, is it ornithology or is it Take the A Train? I mean, those are like both fairly well-known tunes, but like the syncopation's different in both. I mean, sorry to interject on that, but
no, you're totally right. And I think, like that's was a great day in Theory One this fall, was that I I've said this many times in the podcast, but that I would start each class with a recording this fall, and then we'd talk about it, and a song of the day. And I played something. I don't remember even what it was that sparked this conversation, but the students were debating whether or not it was jazz. And it was something I was pretty comfortable calling it jazz, but anyway, it sparked this whole debate among the students. And so I said, okay, I'm going to play you some other things. So we just went off book, lesson planning 101. Feel free to toss it out. And I played like Pork and Beans, right? And then I played like Take the A Train.
Okay.
And then I played some free jazz, like Ornette Coleman or, someone doing just atonal free jazz. And I was like, all of these are categorized as jazz. Right. I know what it was. It was an Alice Coltrane. I played an Alice Coltrane harp piece. And they were like, wait, is this jazz?
Wow.
And so I played all of these different things. And I was like, any of these would easily be categorized as jazz. But do they sound at all alike? Like, does Pork and Beans sound like Take the A Train? No, not at all. And there's really not even that many years separating those two pieces of music. And I was like, this is true in all styles, that they evolve, they change across time, and that really our labels are just ours. Like, we want to put things into categories, but music resists it pretty much always. I mean, Beethoven, there's still a debate over whether Beethoven is a classical or an early romantic composer. That's something people talk about still now.
But he definitely has
Beethoven,
3 periods. 3 periods.
Right.
Definitely
Oh, yeah.
3 periods.
For sure. And I'm sure he was thinking to himself, I'm leaving my early period now.
Yeah.
And I'm embarking on my... Like, come on,
That's right.
We want to categorize things. That's on us. But music doesn't want to be categorized. And composers don't really want to be. They want to just write their stuff, I think. Paul, am I right?
Yeah, we just want to write our stuff.
I think you don't want to have to be like, I'm a minimalist. Like you just want to write your music.
Right, yeah. And we let the theorists and the historians, musicologists do all the labeling, right? Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I think the challenge with that is when we get into harmonic topics that are so Western focused. Like, syncopation happens everywhere, right?
Yeah.
But what about when you get to the chapter where you're talking about Neapolitan 6 and augmented 6 chords?
Yeah.
And then you're like, then you pull in, this jazz, tune. As an example of an augmented 6 chord or something like that. And,
well, jazz is easy because they do happen there.
But
I mean, they're essentially tritone subs
to validate this kind of Western art music, right? You're bringing that in.
Well, that's kind of what I'm saying, is that jazz is easy because they do use them, and they use them in a similar fashion. But
why don't we ever go back? Why don't we start with the jazz, like this is an augmented 6 chord, and then go, hey, Beethoven does that too. We never do that, right?
We don't.
Right.
We
Valid.
don't.
Yeah, Beethoven.
We don't. And in jazz, of course, it's not a voice leading chord in jazz. It's a tritone sub, basically. It just resolves to a dominant instead of to a major or minor 7 chord. So, but in Beethoven, it is a voice leading chord. In Mozart, it is a voice leading chord. So you're right. Like, we don't pull it back in that way. But also, we don't go hunting for them in Bruno Mars, probably either, and or totally non-Western structures because, so the key there is probably to address it that way, to say, like, this is a phenomenon that's common in Western music.
Right.
That's the thing that we haven't called out for our whole, like the way we were taught to teach. It's like Western music is all there is. So here's augmented 6 chords, and everybody uses them, of course, rather than saying, like, this is something specific to, like, a very particular kind of music. And you find it somewhat in other spaces used differently, and not at all in lots of places, Yeah,
every music has a descriptor or a prefix, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and how can we also start to talk about things that don't occur at all in Western music? How can we find those things and start to make sure we're talking about those as well? I don't have the answer. That's why I posed the question.
It's a hard question to answer.
Yeah. I mean, that goes back to our training and the fact that we don't largely have that exposure when we get our graduate degrees. Thank you, Lee Van Handel, for pointing that out.
Yeah.
Pulling up her slides that I took screenshots of.
And even in Western music, like that jazz conversation sparked a whole conversation about what is country and what is not country, and on that same day, we really had a rabbit hole kind of day that day, but it was really productive. I think it was a really good discussion, but I'm not equipped to talk to them about country music. It's not something I've listened to much. I know limited things. Even trying to bring in artists to play at the beginning of class, at one point I was like, we are like 7 weeks in and I've not played a single country song as the song of the day because I just don't know them. Like it's outside my wheelhouse. So I went and found some stuff and, played it. But we are so specialized in graduate school. Like, I studied early 20th century atonality. That is applicable almost not at all to anything else.
Hey, Schoenberg is now public domain, so
I didn't even study him.
Go for it now.
I didn't even study him. I was writing about Eimert and Golechev.
He was too popular.
Other people.
She's even more nuanced.
For real, I didn't want to write a 1,200-page dissertation, so I stuck with other people that are less well known. But thankfully, I like lots of other stuff, and I'm interested in lots of other stuff, and most of us are too. But that doesn't mean that we got a super broad instruction on how the music is set up to begin with, let alone how to teach it. And so that's the work we're doing.
Yeah, no, she also, I think, really, Lee Van Handel I'm talking about, brought up a good point. Even within Western music, graduate students are saying, we want to study more popular music. We want to study more film music. That is music that exists in Western culture. But I don't remember necessarily professors, over the moon to supervise dissertations on film music and pop music. You're probably going to have a couple people, and hopefully more now. But I think that has sparked a lot of good research that hopefully will be presented at some of the regional societies. I submitted my first film music proposal this winter, so we'll see what happens with it. But I hope to do more of that stuff too, just kind of to expand what we're doing, both in undergraduate and graduate, both. A lot of times we talk about undergraduate more in here, but maybe we talk about graduate more sometimes too. It's kind of how do we prepare our graduate students to be prepared in all of these different ways. It's hard to do that. You can only attend so many seminars. You don't want to be in graduate school forever. We all know that. But could we possibly trim down maybe a little bit, of something like atonality? Do we need all of this atonality? Maybe a little bit of film music, or maybe atonal film music. I don't know. Maybe there's an overlap there that you can kind of do both and. I don't know. But certainly, she raised some really good points at the SMT in her talk that I really liked.
It was when she was talking about like foreign language. Like I had to learn I took something like 9 semesters of foreign language between my master's and my doctorate. Because I took 4 semesters of German, 4 semesters of French, and the German reading class for research. That's 9 semesters. And, and was also like going to German book reading club and, like doing all these things to try to keep those language skills relevant and alive. And I happen to like learning language, so it didn't, I wasn't mad about it. But like,
right.
How often do I use that now? Well, sometimes I do translate my own texts for when we're analyzing something in class. I'll just translate it like on the spot. But I could Google it, like, is that relevant? And, it was interesting to see that most people felt it really wasn't relevant, even to their research or to what they've done since, some
Right.
for sure. Like I couldn't have written the dissertation I wrote if I didn't read actually both German and French. I would have been up a creek, but that's not every topic. And that's not every, is it worth that much instruction time in a degree?
Yeah, I think she mentioned something about the folks who said that the language requirement was very useful. Um, Also aligned with the people who could choose the language. So there wasn't like either German or
Yes.
French. They could choose,
Well, and actually, we could
a
choose
computer language. But you had, how many
Right.
options did you have?
we could choose one. So everybody took German, but we could choose what the second language was, and you were encouraged to do a language that was relevant to the research that you intended to do. So I know people who did. I know somebody who did Latin. I know people who did Italian. I know people who did Greek. I know somebody who did Hebrew. So it kind of depended. You had to get it approved. If it wasn't, I think, French, Italian, one of those, you had to get it approved as your second language, which, of course, hopefully some of those barriers are going to go away as well. And I can think of one person who might have wanted to do computer language. That probably didn't pass when we were there, but I hope it would now. So I did have choice, but again, I'm sitting here saying like it ended up being relevant for what I did. So I'm right in line with what Lee said about that, because I had an
Yeah.
element of choice in what I did.
Yeah.
So
Well, what was your favorite single lesson from this past semester? Can you think of one? Or your worst? I don't. I tend to
No,
block
it's just-
those out.
I was joking about the worst lesson. No, I think one of my best one was I did The Lion Sleeps Tonight, a Theory 1. It was really fun. We kind of made the song, and then we talked about how that's different from the original, kind of some of the appropriation that happened there. But also it's something that is really relatable, and you can also improvise with it really easily, so it opened a lot of doors to that too. A lot of people were willing to improvise once we got going. And it was just really fun. It can kind of show how some of the lines move, how you can create different parts with it. Yeah, it was fun. It was really fun. Did The Lion Sleeps Tonight. I had never done that before, and super cool. Super cool. We had a good time with that in Theory 1, the big class.
Awesome.
that's good. It's kind of blurring for me. It's all blurring together.
I can go, I think.
Yeah, go ahead.
Actually, it was also a popular music day that I can think of, is that we looked at Adele's Easy on Me and Olivia Rodrigo's Deja Vu, because all of my students are obsessed with Olivia Rodrigo.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
definitely.
she is the thing. And so we just used chord charts and no notated music, or no staff notation, I should say. And we analyzed the chords, but we also just did a lot of analysis through our listening. So, listening to texture, we were talking about all of the different kind of layers in the Olivia Rodrigo piece. So we talked about novelty layer, and kind of the different timbres, why they would use that. And like with Adele's performance, like that song Easy on Me is like piano, voice, and like very light bass. Like that's it, right? But it's an amazing performance. So you talk about her singing, the different ways that she's singing, her timbre, her intonation, because there's some spots where it's kind of like it's not auto-tuned, I should say. So like there's an Adam Neely video where it's like, is this song, is Easy on Me microtonal? Because like there's a melisma where it's like she's not like on a B flat or a B, it's kind of in the middle, right? And what that does to the song, why they would choose to the producer would choose to keep that type of kind of error or mistake in there. And that was just a really, really fun class. We have an hour and 20-minute long theory classes. But we spent the whole day on those two pieces, on those two songs, and it was really good. So that was a success I can think of.
It's good. I can think of like little activities that we did that worked really well. A lot of them were with the keyboards. So figuring out what the leading tone is by like actually physically raising it, that kind of thing while you're doing the scale. some of the improv activities in all the classes. I used them in jazz as well. And yeah, those are the things I can think of. I know you were joking about talking about worst, but there was a day in Theory 4 where we got on a total rabbit trail about the song of the day we went on and on and on, and we really dug in. And I looked at the clock and we had like 30 minutes left, and I was like, they have to learn how to do like transposition and inversion of a set today. They have to.
We're going to take a little pivot there.
Because if they don't, I'm going to have to delete something from our curriculum. So all of a sudden I was like, this has been a great discussion, but now we need to talk about this. And so I'm like flying through it. They're barely getting time to write stuff down. And they're like, wait a minute, why do we go backwards? Why? So I basically had to like reteach the whole thing at the beginning of the next class period. That was not a great day.
That's
I remember
hilarious.
leaving and being like, I didn't manage chime very well today, but I did really enjoy that first part of class where we were like digging into something and really like having a good, robust discussion about music. That was great. And then I had to ruin it with like, let's do math.
Speaking of time management, I thought of my worst class. And so I'd mentioned that we have hour and 20-minute theory classes. We have 50-minute aural skills classes. I was teaching I think it was a Theory 4, and I let the class out after 50 minutes because I was like, oh, we're done. And I'm like, okay, well, we're wrapped up for today. And I hadn't gotten through everything I wanted to, but I was like, I just ran out of time management. And they all left the class. No one said anything. And then they were standing in the hallway, and I'm just like, putting things away. And then they come in, they're like, this is a Wednesday, not a Tuesday or a Thursday. I'm like, oh my gosh, we have 30 more minutes of class.
That's awesome. I totally did that once. I did that once.
Like,
the same thing. It ended at 50 when it was supposed to end at 20. Right?
Yeah. And so I was like, well, come on in. And so we finished the class, but I couldn't believe that I did that. But that's why I had so much more material to go over, because I had another 30 minutes left in class.
I love that they told you. I mean, that's a good sign that they're all like, wait, sign. But class isn't supposed to be over yet.
But they already packed up. Like, they had packed up. It took them probably to all just look at each other in the hallway, be like, did that just happen? Dr. Thomas. So.
Oh. Well, I teach Theory 1 at 11. So it goes from 11 to 11:50. Almost everyone eats lunch directly after class. And I had taught Alicia Keys, If I Ain't Got You. And apparently, I did not know this, but when my students went into Bruce Hall for lunch, most of them go to Bruce Hall for lunch, Alicia Keys, If I Ain't Got You, was playing. And they came back the next day and said, oh my gosh, Dr. Graff, we see what you did. Oh my goodness. And I was just, what are you guys talking about?
You also controlled the music service.
Yeah. They were like, wait, you didn't play that Alicia Keys song over the Bruce Hall speakers? I was like, no, guys, that was in the wild, that just happened. And they're like, oh my gosh, we thought you did that. But that was kind of funny. Like, no, you just encountered music that you studied in theory at lunch. How about that? Oh my goodness,
In the wild.
So yeah, that was kind of funny. I had a good laugh over that one, and they thought I had somehow secretly sabotaged the music systems in the cafe.
Do they really think we have that much power?
Oh yeah,
we must. We don't, to be clear. No. we do not. Yeah.
So what is one thing, maybe this will be our last question for the day. What's one thing that we are looking forward to for the spring, or something we're trying to do new or different? What do we got on tap for the spring?
I can start. I just opened my new iPad Pro, so I am going to be teaching mobile without any wires, and I'm going to be connecting to the projector, so I will be able to see what every student is working on at every moment in the class. I'm just kidding. Okay. A more evil laugh. I don't really mean any evil laugh.
We do control things, apparently.
That was my first vocal solo, by the way. 4th grade, I had a vocal solo, and my mom shows up to the concert. Oh my gosh, what's your solo, Ben? And it was me going, moi, It wasn't even any sung text whatsoever. It was just an evil laugh. I had the best evil laugh in the choir. But anyways,
Nice.
Side note. But yeah, iPad Pro, got a Apple Pencil, Magic Mouse, going to be converting everything to annotating PDFs, and now I can walk around the room instead of being tied to my document camera or staying in front of the room. Those of you that have seen me teach, I am a pacer. I love to move, get those step counts up in the new year, and I will be doing that with my iPad Pro. So thank you to my admin for contributing to that.
And stairs too, because I mean you're in the recital,
Yeah,
so you're going up
exactly.
and down the stairs.
I can go up and down the stairs. I'm going to be all over the place. I love it, because sometimes I feel like I can't connect as well when I'm not getting that proximity. My wife likes to talk about that too with middle school teaching. Proximity is important. Are you getting close to looking at what your students are doing all over the room, or are you just tending to talk to only one group? So I'm excited about that part of it. So
Yeah. And
Well,
shout
'cause
out to Malia Roberson, right? She's the one.
yes, I wrote to Malia and
Yeah.
told her about it. I was so excited because we had joked about it on the podcast, and then it actually happened. I can't believe it actually happened. It's actually here now for the new year.
That's awesome. That's good. I'm teaching Theory 2 and Theory 3 this spring, and it'll be our first run with we've changed Theory 2 so that when we introduce secondary dominance, modulation, and modal mixture, we will be using predominantly popular and jazz examples and not really using the typical classical examples almost at all. And we'll be doing lots of things with lead sheets, no part writing of things like that until Theory 3. We did this in part because our music business majors, most of them only take Theory 1 and 2. And so we've kind of moved things around, shifted things around to make that class more practical. So I'm really excited about that last unit and seeing how it shapes up. My colleague has already taught it this fall and kind of reported some exciting things about it to me. So I'm excited about that. I'm teaching, like I said, Theory 2 and 3, and then I'm teaching 2 theory major only upper level classes. One is advanced analysis and one is pedagogy. And those are always, it's always fun. It's just you and the theory majors having a long chat every day. It's pretty great. Should be a good time. So I'm excited about that. And Ben, of course, you will come in hopefully and do your typical Schenker lecture because I am not an expert on that. But yeah, it should be a good spring. I will say one of the things I'm wrestling with is in all that we've been through in the last 2 years, there's been a lot of like, what standards do we keep? Which ones are not really necessary? How much do we keep things really rigorous? How much grace do we give? All of those kinds of conversations. And I'm really, I'm one of those who they do homework every class period, and I allow corrections and sometimes late work under certain circumstances. And so one of the things that I'm kind of grappling with is very few students are keeping up with the workload anymore. And I'm also struggling to keep up with the workload of grading all of that. And so I'm trying to navigate the last time that I experimented with changing how I did homework or making homework less, fewer times or whatever, the students did not do as well that semester. So I'm really debating, do I try that? I thought about kind of gamifying it. I'm still thinking about that, making it we have this many, you can, you only have to do this many, or making it sort of like a more points-based thing, where there's this many points in the category. It's up to you how many of those you want to accrue, or I don't know. I thought about making certain aspects of it choice. You can choose to do extra keyboard and less homework, or extra this and less that, or whatever. But I'm like, that's also a nightmare for me. Then I have to keep track of all of that.
Right.
So I'm just trying to figure out how to navigate that and make it both easier on them, more manageable for them, but also for myself. Because some of even my strongest students, there were a few who missed maybe 3, 4, 5 homework assignments, which, you know, I mean, there were probably like 40 across the semester. So that's not like missing half or something, but it still feels like, okay, if even the like A level students are struggling to keep up with the workload, then is it serving us anymore to do this level of turning things in? And do they have to do that same exercise 25 times or, you know, whatever? I don't know. That's what I'm grappling with for spring. I don't know if you guys are in a similar situation.
I mean, I feel that too. I think like one of the things that I'm thinking about this semester, and it's more of like a philosophy or way of thinking about what I'm doing, but I think connects to what you're talking about, Jen, is something that Timothy Chanette said after his SMT talk. It was just during the Q&A section, and he just kind of threw out this little line about how he's thinking more of what he's doing. You know, teaching theory is not about gatekeeping, but it's about empowerment, right? And I mean, I've felt like a gatekeeper a lot of my time. Like that's my job. That's my function. You know, in the university or in the music department is to kind of weed students out. Right. We test them to get when they come in here. We put them in the right place, hopefully, and then if they can make it through us, then they're worthy. They have the skills. They can be successful. In music, and I think there's plenty of musicians out there that prove that you don't have to be successful in music theory to be a good musician or to make it, right? And so maybe we're giving ourselves too much credit, like, oh, if they don't pass theory or aural skills, they can't make it. And so thinking about like, how do I view my job as empowering students rather than just kind of keeping them in or out? And so, because that's kind of what we want, right? We want to inspire these students with these skills and the knowledge that we're giving them so that they can then use it in their own career. And does that mean less homework, or maybe that means more applicable homework or work that is appropriate for where they're wanting to go, rather than saying, okay, you have to, label this page and a half of triads and different inversions just because you have to. Right?
Right.
Or maybe if you can do the first 10, you don't have to do the next 35. There's,
Right.
why have to go to these lengths? And so I'm with you, Jen. Like, I don't know exactly how it works, because I think the students are stressed, they're overworked, and I think, and we don't want to us too. Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
Totally.
so,
Yeah.
but maybe thinking less like I have to be this gatekeeper mentality might be helpful. And so that's kind of something that I'm going to be trying to do. And also listening to more hip hop and rap music. That's one of my goals. Because we got to this section and like I am not like we just listened to Hamilton. I mean that's rap, right?
Right.
And but like even the and I love the Clendenning Marvin textbook. I think it's great. But they use Despacito, which was like one of the hit songs from like 3 summers ago, as kind of like a hip hop rap example. And just some of the lyrics, like the English translation, is kind of scandalous. And I'm like, and even my students were kind of like, I mean, I mentioned it just because we were looking at the text, and the students were like, they're like, do you know what this song's about? And so I'm like, I don't know. So like, just getting more, aware, getting a better awareness of that music, so that I can talk about it with not necessarily like authority, but with a place of understanding, right? So those are some of the things that I want to do differently.
I have to really watch out for what lyrics are in songs that I play in class, because I teach at a religious school, and I don't want the lesson to be sidetracked by somebody being offended by something they heard. Like then we're missing the whole point, or we're not getting to use the example for its real purpose anyway, if that's going to be an issue, you know?
Right.
But
Yeah.
I've had the same problem. And even with Hamilton, there are lots of Hamilton songs I can't use because they're explicit. So yeah, I have yet to play like a rap song as the song of the day, which was pointed out to me by a student. And I was like, hey, if you guys have some clean ones, bring them to me. I will play them. But I'm really struggling to find some clean ones that don't either have language or discussions of like violence against women or violence in general, or like I'm struggling. So if you, I'm like, I've been looking and looking. So help me out. If
Can I read you
have
the
them.
lyric of one of the lyrics from Despacito? Because I think it's hilarious, the English translation.
Sure.
Slowly, I want to undress you in kisses, slowly. Firmly in the walls of your labyrinth and of your body, I want to create a manuscript. That's the
Whoa.
English translation.
Manuscript studies.
Wow.
Just kidding.
That'll get them
Wow.
interested in manuscript studies.
There
I
we
guess.
go.
But that would definitely get some eyebrow raises at my institution. So they'd be like, what is going on in theory today?
Right.
I had just texted my TA about Doja Cat. Any of y'all like Doja Cat?
I don't even know what that
What
is.
you're talking
Ben.
about. Yeah.
Oh
I'm
my
lame and old,
gosh, it's-
apparently.
Doja Cat's taken the TikTok world by storm, I think, but I don't know.
I don't
We're
even
trying
have
to
TikTok on my
incorporate some of that. Daily Theory TikToks. Nobody's going to do that this spring semester, maybe.
Oh,
I don't
Doja
know.
Cat is a woman. I thought it was like a cartoon or something.
No.
She's an American rapper.
American rapper. There you go.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, we're trying to
I mean, if they're
incorporate
TikToks,
Doja Cat
they can't-
this spring.
That's good. If they're TikToks, they can't be long. So maybe that will help the clean factor. It might be easier to find.
Yeah, if you just take that excerpt, it could be the best 30 seconds of or something. Yeah, exactly. I don't know. We'll see what we can do with that. But yeah, we've been talking a lot about Doge.
You're so hip, Ben. Doge.
I know.
What
He's
Not
so
really. This is a facade.
Way
Let me
cooler
just tell
than
you
me.
right now. But yeah, hopefully we can get that into theory too. I don't know. We'll see. See how it works out. What else? I think that's it. Rapid fire.
Oh, no. I didn't
Oh
come up
no!
with rapid fire.
I
today.
didn't come up with anything rapid fire.
No rapid fire.
This was a whole rapid fire discussion.
Yeah.
This
It
whole
pretty much
thing.
was.
Truly,
Yeah.
truly. So yeah, so this was fun, and so we'll have to do another wrap up after the spring to see how we did on achieving our goals, and if I truly listened to more rap music and things like that. But yeah, so we will have more episodes coming up this spring. We're really excited about some of the guests that we have coming up and some of our ideas. And you can, of course, reach out to us on Facebook, our email, notedoctorspodcast@gmail.com. I don't think we've actually gotten one single email to that to that address. So if you are still listening to this episode, which maybe 5 people are, send us an email at notedoctorspodcast@gmail.com just to say that you made it to the very end of whatever episode this is. I'm trying to log into our podcast email right now to see if we even have anything. But yeah, but thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you all later.